Hello, everyone. Welcome to the First Unitarian Society of Milwaukee's online worship service. I'm Reverend Dina McFeeters, and I'm honored to serve as Associate Minister. We welcome people of all genders, sexualities, ages, races, ethnicities, histories, and bodies. We welcome your mind, your heart, and your spirit. We welcome all that you are carrying with you today and all that your heart longs to set down. We'd like to pay a special welcome to guests joining us today. If you're visiting for the first time or joining us from afar, why don't you say hello in the chat and tell us where you're joining us from? I welcome you to our worship service today by inviting you to repeat our mission after me. We gather to nurture the spirit, engage the mind, and inspire action. Let's return to our beloved sanctuary for the lighting of the flaming chalice, symbol of Unitarian Universalism.
Good morning. I'm Reverend Dina McFeeters, and I serve as Associate Minister at First Unitarian Society of Milwaukee. We have a candle of life today. I'm sorry to say that 2 members of First Church have died. Camille Johnson died peacefully on the night of Saturday, August 6th, 2022, at Aurora Sinai Hospital with her children Emma, Jacob, and Josh by her side. Camille's health declined after a broken leg from a July 30th fall. She entered intensive care on August 3rd and comfort care on August 6th. She was 74 years old and had been a member of First Church since 2014. Details about a celebration of Camille's life will be forthcoming. Beverly Jean Catter died in her sleep early Saturday morning, July 30th, 2022, at Froedtert Hospital after experiencing complications following surgery for cancer earlier in the month. Her sons, Vincent and Eric, were with her. Beverly entered hospice care on July 29th and requested no visitors so she could concentrate on happy memories with her sons. Beverly was 89 years old and had been a member of First Church since 1999. Plans for a memorial service at First Church will be forthcoming. As is our custom in this church, whenever we have a birth, an adoption, or a death of one of our members, we light our candle of life today in honor of Camille Johnson and Beverly Jean Catter.
Hi, my name is Marisa Riepenhoff, and I am honored to be your worship associate today. In my mid-20s, I experienced a devastating romantic heartbreak and my first big grown-up failure, the subsequent divorce. I was in and out of depression for months afterwards. Luckily, I lived in Austin, Texas, where it was almost always sunny and warm, and there was a definitively annoying culture of health and wellness. Peer pressure to train for a 10K race forced me to crawl out of the fetal position on my small apartment's carpet, which was an especially good thing because that carpet was stained with cat urine I hadn't even tried to clean properly. Pretty soon, running long distances was key to my mental stability. I found myself on the Town Lake Trail, frequently running with a 72-year-old man named Hank, whom I'd encountered there one Saturday morning, along with his mutt of a dog, aptly named Jogger. I loved running with Hank because he was surprising. He would often leap outside the bounds of the trail and take off without permission through a gap in the fence of the Japanese botanical gardens, for example. Quite a shock for the paying guests. But I also loved running with Hank because of the conversation. My friends and colleagues were all 20-somethings who didn't know much about divorce yet, and Hank had seen some life. I remember complaining to him one morning about my mother. I was in that early stage of therapy where everything seemed connected to my family of origin, and I was having a revelation. At no fault of my therapist, this was a revelation of blaming my mother for everything: my divorce, choosing the wrong partner in the first place, even my terrible haircut. Seriously. Hank was not up to shenanigans that day. And after my tirade was over, he said rather quietly, "Do you have a picture of her?" "What?" "Your mother. Do you have a picture of her?" "Yes." "Well, frame it and hang it up and look at it and be grateful to her because she won't be around forever." Later that day, I went to Target, bought some picture frames, and hung 2 photographs. One of my mom when she was 19 and newly married to my dad, looking into the sun, and another of the 2 of us at the beach, our first trip to Cape Cod. I'm about 8 years old and she's only 30, newlywed in her second marriage, holding me tight. We're both laughing so hard, smiling and squinting, the waves crashing around us. Each photograph reminds me of my mother's beauty and her love, and especially her vulnerability. Characteristics that are always part of her, but hard to see when I'm blaming her for what's happening in my life. I remember looking at those photos and realizing my mom was a whole human being whose story was much larger than me, and certainly much larger than the story coursing through my brain about any hurt she'd caused. Digging through all that family history was a vital part of the healing process surrounding my divorce. It was true that my mom made decisions during my childhood that affected my life in ways I would not have chosen. But that wasn't the whole truth. When I looked at her tense and hopeful body in both of those pictures, I could see how she was trying to hold everything together. And looking at my mom through that lens gave me so much empathy for her. It still does. I still have those framed photos. I'll never forget the gift Hank gave me in that moment on the running trail. I am not able to choose everything that happens to me, but I do have a choice now, every day, to see my mother, my whole family, the whole picture, pain and love and all, through a frame of gratitude.
Open my heart to all that First Unitarian Society of Milwaukee. It is a joy to get to be with you today. It is a delight to be welcomed in to worship with you, to be welcomed in through this format, to be with you in your homes, to be with you on your walks, to be with you as we journey on this spiritual life together. Now, I've met some of you before, and it has been a privilege. I've been here with you in Milwaukee actually two times before, and both of those experiences were absolutely pivotal in my ministry and in my personal life too. So one of them was pre-pandemic. I was here with a number of leaders from my congregation at a event that you were hosting for folks from all over the region. And it was folks from the Transforming Hearts Collective were with us to teach us and help us learn about how to create the experience of radical welcome in our congregations, to imagine what that might be like, to expand our understanding, and to tell different stories about who is welcome here in our Unitarian Universalist congregations, and then to make that real in our lives and in the ways that we are together, to tell a bigger story, a better story, a more life giving story of who can be and who is and who should be a part of Unitarian Universalism. That conference, I went home and immediately started making changes in our congregational life, and it is with me still. Now, the other moment happened a little bit earlier, and it was back in the summer of 2016. You might remember that because it was a pivotal time in the life of your congregation as well. It was August of 2016, and you were welcoming a new minister into your midst, a new senior minister, the Reverend Jennifer Nordstrom. And I was here with you just for a brief time over a weekend to help lead the startup retreat between your board of trustees and Reverend Jennifer. Now, I was thrilled to be here because I knew this was a great match between congregation and minister. And I knew Jennifer to be a colleague, a minister who is so grounded in her own spiritual life that she offers a deep well of compassion, that she is justice seeking, justice creating, and that what you all could do together would be so full of shared purpose and possibility. It was a delight to play any part in helping you all get started together. So that weekend back in August of 2016, it was an exciting moment for me professionally and in my ministry because I felt so thrilled for what was happening for you all, and I felt so focused and energized in my own calling. But it was a moment in my life personally too. So let me tell you about that a little bit. You see, I'm a mom. It's a great joy in my life. And of course, parenting is a spiritual practice. Absolutely caring for others in any way is a spiritual practice, and learning how to balance self care and care of others, right? How to do that in a way that is healthy and whole and life giving for us. So there I was, and my kids at that point in the summer were ages 5 and 9. And what that meant was that my youngest child was about to enter kindergarten. And for any of you who have been in that moment, it is exciting and scary, right? As they're about to make that move towards more independence, to be in other people's care, to learn and grow. But what it also means is a new sense of freedom, possibly, for you as the caregiver. So for me, it was going to be the first time in years that both of my kids would be on the same schedule, going to the same school. It was going to be the first time that we weren't spending the equivalent of a month's mortgage payment on childcare all the time. It was going to be a time that I imagined with these lofty goals and expectations, right? Once our kids got settled in school on that predictable schedule together, I was going to have room, so much room to take care of myself again in ways I hadn't for 9 years at that point. Time to go to the gym, I was sure of it, to meditate for lengthy periods of time every morning in the quiet of our house, to take our dog out for long walks around the lake. I would do all of these things every day. I was sure of it. And somehow we would accumulate masses of savings with all that we weren't spending on childcare. I had so many big ideas of what was coming for the fall of 2016. And in particular, right, I have this memory of being in the nice hotel room that you all had booked for me here in Milwaukee. And I had just started taking yoga classes on August 1st. So there I was in the hotel room on August 6th, dutifully there with my yoga mat laid out, there in my warrior pose, engaged in my spiritual practice, deeply focused professionally. This was what the year was going to be like. I had hopes and expectations. And then, just like it happens for so many of us, everything changed. I went home, and it was just a few weeks later, actually, just the night before our daughter was supposed to start kindergarten, when the lightning hit. And for our family, I mean the literal lightning. A lightning bolt hit our house in the middle of the night, in the middle of a storm, and our house caught on fire. And that experience that cuts a line through your life where there's a before and an after, that's what that was for us, for me and my family. And I want to tell you right away the most important part of that story, which is that all of us walked out of that house. Physically, we were all okay, the dog included, and I will be forever grateful for that for all of my days. But I will tell you, our hopes and expectations and the way we thought things were going to go all went right out the window, out into the air on that night as we stood there in the rain watching our house go up in flames. Now, you know what this is like. It might not be a literal bolt of lightning that you have experienced, or maybe it is. But all of us in our lives have experiences like this, experiences that cut across our lives, and we know them because there is a before and there is an after. It takes different forms for each of us, right? It can come because we have fallen in love, and there is a before and after to that. It can come because we've had some great success professionally. It can come because someone we love has died. Maybe it's a diagnosis we have received. Maybe it's a hope for something we've had our whole lives that we now know will not come true the way we had hoped and longed for. We all have these moments, these events that happen in our lives, and they have the power to change us in some pretty significant ways. Now, through the experience of our house fire and the sense I tried to make after it, I really focused in and learned that each of our lives are full of these events that have the power to change us. But we carry within us the power to choose just how we are going to be changed. The stories we tell about these events in our lives, they matter so much. The stories shape us. They shape the sense of possibility of what is to come. The stories we tell about these events in our lives, they matter a great deal. So I want to read you just a little bit. One of the things I did with this experience of the house fire is I started writing. I started writing my way out, honestly, literally telling and retelling and telling again my story so that I could find a life giving story instead of the soul crushing stories or the death dealing stories that are so prevalent in our society and sometimes in our religion, right? So, this book, Take What You Need: Life Lessons After Losing Everything, is what came out of this fire experience for me. One of the things. I want to read you just a little bit because I think this tells us about the telling of stories and how they matter. In the days after our house fire, I realized that our kids were taking their cues from us. They were listening in on those conversations we were trying to have in the other room. And I wanted our kids to hear our gratitude, not our fear. I wanted them to remember the helpers in this situation. I wanted them to remember the folks who came by with a deck of cards and a pan of chocolate chip cookies and a note from the only other family we knew who had ever survived a house fire, telling us that even though we couldn't imagine it yet, our world would feel safe again someday. I wanted them to notice how we always had what we needed, even after we'd lost everything. I wanted them to be able to acknowledge the pain and the loss, to feel the grief, and to come out on the other side with gratitude. And I knew that if we were going to go from grief to gratitude, we were going to have to do it on purpose. The pain we were experiencing was simply too much to expect that time alone was going to heal us. My wife and I needed to be intentional about how we told the story of our fire, because we knew our kids were listening. And it turns out, right, those things that the kids needed, turned out we needed them too. My seminary training had taught me that any event could carry meaning, and we had to be careful about the meaning this event would come to hold in our lives. Old ideas came up, old stories, I'd say, and they surprised me. And I found out that I actually had to say out loud that the lightning was not some sort of punishment from an angry God. This random event wasn't some sort of cosmological joke. It wasn't irrefutable proof that hardship never ends in our lives. And it certainly wasn't a God driven conspiracy to keep me from ever going back to the gym or getting a moment to myself. It was a bolt of lightning. It was morally neutral electricity that could have struck anywhere but happened to strike our house. There was nothing we could have done to predict or prevent or control its coming. But how it would change us and the meaning that we would make, that would be up to us. We think we tell stories, but stories often tell us, the writer Rebecca Solnit says in her book, The Faraway Nearby. We think we tell stories, but stories often tell us, she writes. Often, too often, stories saddle us, whip us onward, tell us what to do, and we do it without questioning. The task of learning to be free, she says, requires learning to hear those stories, to question them, to pause and hear silence, to name them, and then to become the storyteller. This is a spiritual practice she is outlining for us here. It is the task of learning to be free, she says. The task of learning to be free requires that we hear the stories that maybe have always existed as part of our culture. Maybe they're stories that have been told in our families. Maybe they are stories that have been told to us in our religious settings. We need to pause long enough to hear the stories, to go ahead and question them, to wait for silence, and then to write the stories anew, to become the storyteller, to tell our stories in ways that are life giving, possibility creating, that might help us to live differently. So I'll tell you that in writing this book, I didn't just stick with the house fire because once I learned that we could write our stories differently and how intentional I had to be about writing the story of the fire for myself and for our kids, to learn to hold both grief and gratitude, love and loss, and all of it at once, I knew then that I could go back through my life, through the stories that our culture and community tells, and I could listen to those stories. I could question them, I could pause, and I could write them anew in ways that better served me and better served us and created the world we long for. And a dear friend of mine read an early version of the book and she gave me a phrase for what I was up to that I've held on to ever since. She said, Jen, you have gone back through your life and you are rewriting your stories through the lens of love. This lens of love. How do we learn to rewrite our stories, to become free, and then to live that way, to live through that lens of love? This is what I'm asking us to consider, asking us to try out in our individual lives, in our congregational life, in our larger life as communities. What is it to really listen to those stories, to choose an intentional path forward, and then to live through the lens of love? This is spiritual work. This is the work of our congregations, of our own spiritual lives. I try to imagine what our world would be like if we lived through the lens of love, that that was our goal. What would it look like in your life? What would change? How might your heart soften? How might you grow in empathy? How might the divisions that are so often there between us suddenly dissolve like salt in water if we could see each other as beloved and act that way? This is powerful work. And it is the calling that our Universalist ancestors have left for us and are demanding of us. They are telling us, they always have, that salvation doesn't come from some outside force, that salvation comes in the form of love. Love for all of the parts of ourselves, love for each other, to be able to have this sense of love that is ever expanding, of community that is ever expanding because we are intimately interconnected with each other. They are asking us, I am asking us, to learn to love differently, to learn to live, to learn to live through the lens of love with an open heart. What might that look like? I tell you, I come right back to the poets whenever I need sustenance, whenever I need learning. And today I go to the poet Marge Piercy. Maybe you have heard this before. It's a poem she wrote called To Have Without Holding. And the first line, she writes, learning to love differently is hard, isn't it? Learning to love differently is hard, she writes. Love with the hands wide open. Love with the doors banging on their hinges, the cupboards unlocked, the wind roaring and whimpering in the rooms, rustling the sheets and snapping the blinds that thwack like rubber bands in an open palm. It hurts to love wide open, she says, stretching the muscles that feel as if they are made of wet plaster, then of blunt knives, then of sharp knives. It hurts to thwart the reflexes of grab, of clutch, to love and let go again and again. It pesters to remember the lover who is not in the bed, to hold back what is owed to the work that gutters like a candle in a cave without air. To love consciously, conscientiously, concretely, constructively. I can't do it, you say. It's killing me. But you thrive. You glow on the street like a neon raspberry. You float and sail a helium balloon, bright bachelor's button blue and bobbing on the cold and hot winds of our breath. As we make and unmake in passionate diastole and systole the rhythm of our unbound bonding, to have and not to hold, to love with minimized malice, hunger and anger, moment by moment balanced. Learning to love differently is hard, she says. To love with the hands wide open, with the cupboards banging on their hinges. Learning to love differently is hard. Learning to live differently is hard. And you can do it. We can do it. We can learn to love differently. Hands and hearts wide open, stories that sustain us and sustain a future we long for. Learning to love differently. It's hard, but it is oh so worth it. So, friends, today I invite you, I invite myself, I invite us as a collective to take the time to really investigate the stories we tell about those moments that happen in our lives as individuals and community, as a world, to really listen to those stories, to question them, to pause, and then to become the storyteller. What events in your life do you need a new story about? What events in your congregation do you need a new story about? What events in our country do we need a new story about? So many. May our hearts be open. May love hold us and move through us. May we take up the spiritual work of living through the lens of love. May it be so. Amen.
Dear ones, I'll leave you with these closing words by Arthur Foote. May peace dwell within our hearts and understanding in our minds. May courage steel our wills, and love of truth forever guide us. May it be so.
We are going, heaven knows where we are going. We know within, and we will get there. Heaven knows how we will get there, but we know we will. Whoa, yeah, yeah. Whoa, yeah, yeah. Whoa, yeah, yeah. Whoa, yeah, yeah.